Hello there, this is Senorus. This video is part 2 of a series on the philosophy and politics of Metal Gear Rising. The first video covers Raiden's early history as well as the events of Metal Gear Solid 2 and 4 and the intro of Metal Gear Rising. We also covered Raiden's existentialist philosophy and how he came to see the world through that lens. I'll link to that video in the description if you'd like to check it out. We pick up 3 weeks after Raiden's failure to save Prime Minister Namani and his defeat at the hands of Jetstream Sam. He is on board a supersonic drone which is en route to his next mission. Raiden has received an upgraded cyborg body that more closely resembles his MGS-4 body than the more human-like one he had at the start of MGR. A new character named Wilhelm Voigt, who is simply referred to as Doctor, is introduced. Doctor was responsible for creating Raiden's new cyborg body as well as the cyborgification surgery to place him in it. He explains that Raiden can seize enemy cyborgs' nano repair units and absorb their electrolytes to maintain his new cyborg body. Electrolytes, it's what cyborgs crave. Doctor also requests that Raiden bring back any cyborg left hands he comes across because the combat data contained within would be valuable for his research, and that he can provide Raiden hardware upgrades in exchange for them. Doctor is a capitalism-loving liberal from East Germany and resents that the wall coming down ruined his chances at winning a neoliberal science award. Raiden, who is not in the mood for Doctor's bootlicking bullshit, informs the team that he is approaching the LZ. Kevin Washington, who works with Courtney and Boris as an advisor to Maverick, gives Raiden his mission objectives, which consist of defeating the PMCs responsible for a military junta in Abkhazia and bringing their leader, a terrorist named Dolzaev, to justice. Boris points out that Dolzaev's arms supplier is Desperado, the same PMC responsible for the death of Namani, and which Sundowner and Jetstream Sam are members of. Kevin suggests that their goal is likely to destabilize the region for the sake of profitable mercenary and arms sales contracts. The idea of Western arms manufacturers arming and profiting from a conflict between two post-Soviet factions that disagree over which ethnic and geographic regions belong to whom seem a bit fantastical, but this is the Metal Gear Solid series, so what do you expect? Kevin makes an insensitive comment towards Raiden, which he ignores, and lets the team know he is ready for insertion. Raiden jumps out of the drone with style and does a sexy Baywatch strut up the beach. He unveils his new cyborg face, revealing an eye patch, which is Metal Gear Solid code for "this guy is a badass motherfucker." Boris tells Raiden to follow his Soliton radar to his objective. Apparently they figured out how to make nanomachine GPS work even when enemies know where you are between the years 2014 and 2018. Raiden has a quick codec conversation with Boris in which he is told that this is not a solo-seeking mission and going in guns blazing is fine, as well as a conversation with Doctor where Raiden further reinforces his views as an existentialist that is beholden to himself rather than a nation, and then it's off to the races. After defeating the first set of cyborgs sent to stop him, Raiden talks with Kevin, discussing the improved power of his new cyborg body and confirming intel on the high number of enemy cyborgs in the area. Kevin explains that the availability of cyborg technology has led to mass adoption by mercenaries and PMCs all over the world. Courtney points out that the PR difference in private armies providing upgrades to their contractors versus a nation mandating bodily mutilation for its armed forces, reminding us of the dystopian late-stage capitalist future in the post-SOP world. Raiden compares the enemy cyborgs to electrolyte vending machines, which Kevin finds dehumanizing, but Raiden invokes his tool of justice philosophy, declaring their deaths as justifiable in the bigger picture of fighting to end the system of privatization of militaries that led them to this. Kevin finds this a bit disturbing, but concedes that this is what he and the rest of Maverick signed up for. Raiden heads into the city to search for Dolzaev. Boris informs Raiden that Dolzaev has been spotted in a refinery on the other side of the city, that the enemy likely knows he's coming, and that a Desperado captain named Mistral is likely waiting for him. Raiden begins slicing his way through the city, encountering many cyborgs, some of whom have begun executing captured civilians. Further on, he runs into cyborg teams with Gecko, an old unmanned Metal Gear, or UG model, that has been around since before the Guns of the Patriots incident. Looking forward to getting a good leg day in, Raiden eagerly engages his old enemies, who seem to have gotten some upgrades since the last time he faced them. Thankfully, fighting giant autonomous death robots is like riding a bike, and Raiden quickly recalls how to defeat them. Continuing into the city, he encounters more Gecko and cyborgs, which he makes short work of. All of a sudden, he hears an ominous robotic voice.
Greetings, cyborg.
Show yourself.
I am IF Prototype LQ84I.
IF Prototype.
Interface Prototype. All autonomous UGs feature high-level onboard artificial intelligence. An additional prototype interface enables verbal communication.
The voice belongs to a prototype UG designated LQ84I, aka Blade Wolf, and similar to Raiden, it has a very clear purpose in life.
Why are we here?
I am here to kill you.
Unlike Raiden, however, Blade Wolf's purpose was given to it by its creators, rather than decided for itself.
That's it? Pretty simple thinking for such a mighty intellect.
I may analyze orders, but I may not disobey them. Should I disobey a direct order, my memory would be wiped. I must destroy you.
What good is an intellect if you can't use it?
Raiden points out that the capacity to make decisions for oneself is useless if you don't make them, which Blade Wolf doesn't appreciate, and he engages Raiden in battle. Blade Wolf is one of the more interesting characters in Metal Gear Rising. He brings up fundamental questions about the nature of freedom and determinism with regard to machine intelligence, such as, can machines have free will? Do existential ideas of the absurd and bad faith apply to artificial intelligence as much as they do biological ones? Or perhaps more? Does the machine code or programming applied to an AI like him limit his freedom more or less than a biological intelligence's genetic code does? Does free will exist at all for either man or machine? These are classic sci-fi thought experiments that have been brought up in many other fictional works such as Battlestar Galactica, Westworld, Blade Runner, and the many sci-fi novels they are inspired by from authors like Philip K. Dick and Isaac Asimov. Blade Wolf has lived all of his life as a tool for others, first by DARPA as a project to replace both normal soldiers and cyborgs on the battlefield. The project was eventually cancelled as the DARPA researchers weren't able to program the killer instinct required for battle in a short enough period of time. Later, he was found and reactivated by Desperado, as they thought they could program him to be a killer where DARPA could not. One of his first missions for the PMC was to eliminate Samuel Rodriguez, who at the time was a vigilante that had decided to kill Senator Armstrong for his involvement with World Marshal, the largest PMC in the world since the fall of Ocelot's Outer Heaven. Blade Wolf managed to ambush Sam in the sewers below World Marshal HQ, but Sam was ready for him.
LQ84I, a prototype UG with a conversational interface.
A talking robot dog, basically?
State your business here.
Me? Oh, just sharpening my skills. Wandering the earth, dispensing justice, but only to those who deserve it. Such as outlaws, desperados.
You refer to World Marshal.
The ones holding your leash, right?
The ones who issue my orders.
And your orders are to kill me?
Yes.
He chastised Blade Wolf for being on Desperado's leash and being unable to fight for his own ideals rather than those giving him orders. Before joining up with Desperado, Sam was quite a bit of an existentialist like Raiden, living his own life according to his own ideals, but I'll cover that more in a later video. Sam suggests that Blade Wolf try thinking for himself, which he considers momentarily, before remembering that his memory would be wiped if he went against his orders. The two draw blades and engage in battle. Despite having no cybernetics at this point, Sam's skill as a swordsman is enough to defeat Blade Wolf, who doesn't understand how he could be defeated by a human. Sam tells him it was because Blade Wolf fights because he is forced to, but Sam fights because he chooses to. Before he is deactivated, Blade Wolf concedes that his lack of free will is a flaw in his design, which becomes one of his first important lessons in life, as well as the start of his growing respect towards Sam. While most of Desperado had written off Blade Wolf as useless after his defeat and lacking the killer instinct required of him, Mistral believed that she could teach an old dog some new tricks. She had several ideas about how she could instill that killer instinct in him.
Repress your emotions through certain training scenarios over and over. or teach you that following orders absolves you of responsibility. Instill a fanatical belief in our cause, that our enemies deserve death. Or perhaps convince you that they aren't people at all, that they are less than human, that they are like animals, things. I wonder which method would work best on you.
I possess neither man's killer instinct nor his moral urge to resist it. None of your methods would be effective.
Are you saying I cannot teach you any new tricks? Very well. Continue your training.
Later, Blade Wolf was deployed to Abkhazia under Mistral's command to assist in the coup there, as well as eliminate Raiden if he was encountered. During his briefing for the Abkhazia mission, he was told he would be working with Camus, another member of Desperado. Camus, being an American good old boy, frames the violent overthrow of an elected government as spreading freedom, to which Blade Wolf replies that he wouldn't know about freedom.
I would not know about freedom.
Then get ready for an education.
We will see who gets the education.
Mistral, our mission is to spread freedom. If so, then why am I never offered a choice?
Why? Well, that's...
Mistral's contemplation of Blade Wolf's question and chuckle to herself is probably meant to show her remembering her own journey towards freedom, which we will discuss shortly. During his mission with Camus, Mistral disengages Blade Wolf's range inhibitor, granting him a sense of freedom he has never experienced before. Mistral reminds him that she can switch it back on at any time, which Blade Wolf doesn't like the sound of.
anytime.
Mistral can't help but laugh out of surprise for his yearning for freedom as Blade Wolf attempts to make an escape. Mistral alerts the Desperado forces in the area that Blade Wolf has gone AWOL and orders his destruction. Blade Wolf fights through the forces in the Abkhazia capital, which probably explains why Raiden encounters such sparse resistance before his encounter with Blade Wolf. Eventually, Blade Wolf encounters Camus, who uses a pretty cool Metal Gear with a giant chain axe that looks like something from Warhammer 40k. Camus derides Blade Wolf for his lack of understanding of freedom in a way only an American neocon can before attacking. This is the most fierce battle Blade Wolf has faced yet, but Mistral has trained him well. He manages to disarm Camus's Metal Gear, which leads Camus to use foul language. Several strategic strikes later and Camus is rendered helpless and Blade Wolf rips him out of the mech, throwing him high into the air before dismembering him into an unrecognizable state. Camus places the obligatory post-dicing phone call to talk shit to Blade Wolf, who is so close to his freedom that he doesn't really care. Blade Wolf learns his second important lesson. This is also an interesting character development in how it relates back to existentialist philosophy. Blade Wolf understands that a sense of purpose must be decided for oneself rather than living in bad faith according to how others would have you live. Unfortunately, Blade Wolf's freedom is cut short as Mistral appears and re-engages his range inhibitor, revealing that his newfound freedom was just another trick to control him. It's actually kind of sad to see him reduced to just a dog on a leash for people who want to use him for their own purposes. Mistral admits that she just wanted to have Camus killed and that her ruse about freedom was just to get Blade Wolf to do her dirty work. We fast forward and realize that Blade Wolf is telling his story to Sunny, probably after the events of Metal Gear Rising, and they both respect and admire Raiden's sense of purpose. Now back to where we left off with Raiden and Blade Wolf's battle. While Blade Wolf has learned a lot about freedom from his battles with Sam and Camus, he is still bound to Desperado's range inhibitor and AI wiping protocols, so he still hasn't been able to taste it for himself yet. Raiden's taunts probably insult him even more than Sam and Camus's did. Despite his lessons from those fights, he is quickly pushed onto his back legs by Raiden and has to call in backup. Raiden quickly dispatches these amateurs, not even giving Blade Wolf a chance to catch his breath. Raiden beats on him some more, with Blade Wolf barely able to get any hits in. He has to summon more comrades to assist him, this time calling in a gecko, which should be able to make short work of this petulant cyborg. To Blade Wolf's shock, Raiden dispatches this UG even faster than the cyborgs. Blade Wolf is forced to use his most advanced techniques, dashing about the battlefield faster than any human could react to. But Raiden is much more than a human. He easily parries the attack, leaving Blade Wolf stunned. Raiden takes advantage of the opening, lifting Blade Wolf up by the neck and impaling him repeatedly before throwing him into the air and dicing him into digital dog meat. Before going offline, he calls Raiden and deliriously repeats his directive given to him by Desperado. Raiden quips about how Blade Wolf wouldn't know anything about freedom, but judging by what we know about Raiden's character and backstory, as well as subsequent events in the game, it's clear that Raiden felt sorry for Blade Wolf and identified with him on multiple levels. They both grew up in facilities where they were treated as mere tools to be used by others and had to attain their freedom through violence and perseverance. It doesn't show it in-game, but later codecs reveal that Raiden retrieved enough pieces of Blade Wolf for Doctor to put him back together. The AIs in the Metal Gear Solid universe generally aren't reliant on their bodies for survival, and aren't harmed unless the actual AI unit is damaged, so we can assume that either the SSD that his neural network is stored on was spared in Raiden's dismemberment, or there was a backup somewhere that Maverick got a hold of. After his battle with Blade Wolf is concluded, Raiden continues his approach towards the refinery. He is assaulted by flying UGs which destroy a bridge to stop him, but neither this nor their subsequent assault phases him. Further along, Raiden encounters more SOP-era tech such as cyborgs with raging raven wings which are just as ineffective at stopping him. Raiden reaches the compound where Dolzaev is believed to be holed up, but it is locked behind a gate which is apparently more resistant to swords than whatever the UG Ray and Blade Wolf are made of, so he has to backtrack to find the platoon commander who has the RFID chip in his arm to unlock it. He relieves the commander of his arm in the most casual way possible. Doctor points out that the commander was modified in a Patriots facility just like Raiden, which makes him so angry that he takes it out on a nearby APC. Raiden continues on, defeating more cyborgs along the way, and eventually makes it to the roof of the compound. He spots the refinery and decides to reconnoiter the area before heading in.
Dolzaev. That woman.
Raiden, what's happening? Your heart rate's spiking.
Yeah, I just dodged a bullet.
Once the butterflies in his stomach from Mistral's affections have subsided, he continues on to the refinery, but not before he has some codec calls with Kevin and Doctor, both of whom appreciate her big naturals.
Yeah, but, speaking of her looks, she's got, well, I mean, a couple of, huge... Look, just don't get distracted, okay?
Raiden, the Mistral woman, is she truly a full-body cyborg?
That's what the intel says, at least. Why? You noticed something?
Indeed. Two somethings, in fact. Based on their movements, her chest region did not appear to be artificial.
You can tell that just from what I saw?
Indeed. After some detailed image analysis, I am 80% certain that is her own natural torso.
I'm sure you've noticed by now that normal enemies don't really pose much of a threat to Raiden, so let's speed this part up. Raiden effortlessly clears the cyborgs, gecko, and dwarf gecko in his way en route to the refinery. He makes it to the refinery, but takes a moment to play some Overwatch before continuing on. He makes his way up the stairs of the refinery to the roof, where he finds Mistral, the first real boss of the game, waiting for him. Now I have a lot to say about Mistral, but let's hear what she has to say first.
I was wondering when you'd come, Jack the Ripper.
No one calls me that anymore. Dolsaev, where is he?
I can show you a better time than that crusty old bear.
You're in charge here?
I am Mistral, the cold wind of France. And your reputation precedes you. Liberian, but white as snow. A natural-born killer, even as a child.
That was a long time ago.
I was born in Algeria myself, you know? I'm only half French.
And?
We had our own civil war in the 90s. So you see? Cut from the same cloth, you and I.
You don't know me.
I lost my whole family. Everything. But I butchered those fuckers. My family's killers. That's when I realized I am a killer too. And a good one at that. I slaughtered dozens in Iraq, in Afghanistan. I'd found my calling.
Proud of that, are you?
What happened, happened. To be honest, I found it quite dull. My enemies fell like domino, one after another. Not once did I feel threatened. I was adrift, without challenge, without purpose. At times, I even envied my prey. At least they had a cause to die for. And then, I met him.
Who?
And I knew what I had been missing. His ideals gave my life meaning. Ideals, Jack. What are yours?
I protect the weak.
Still? So naive.
And if I must kill to protect them, then so be it.
It seems we have less in common than I thought.
I'll take that as a compliment.
If you would kill for your ideals, then surely you are ready to die for them.
So let's break all of that down. Mistral is a great character that connects the lore and philosophy of the game to real life, relates it to Raiden as an interesting foil, and foreshadows the theme of objectivism versus existentialism that highlights the final act of the game. Mistral's whole shtick is a clear reference to The Stranger by Albert Camus, which is probably the most important existentialist novel of all time. It's also a book that is very dear to me, as I read it when I was 17 and made having a shallow understanding of philosophy my entire personality, like many teenagers have done before and since. Thankfully, debate bros didn't exist in the mid-2000s, or else I might have ended up as one of those people that defends preposterous utilitarian thought experiments that supposedly justify all manner of fucked up shit.
Now you can imagine a situation in which aliens come down to Earth and they say, we're going to blow up the whole planet unless you kill this innocent kid. Now in a consequentialist sense, killing that innocent...
Anyways, there are many parallels between Mistral and Merceau, the main character of The Stranger. The Stranger is the story of a man named Merceau who lives his life in a way most everyone around him finds strange. The book opens with him receiving a telegram about the death of his mother. He takes time off work to go to her funeral, but during the ceremony, the funeral home staff and the attendees observe that he seems to have no grief about the death of his mother, and he finds the expectations of the attendees and staff annoying. He is happy to return to his home in Algiers that night. The next morning, he goes to the beach, where he meets Marie, an old coworker, and the two reconnect, going on a date that night and spending the night together. The next day, after work, he runs into his neighbor Raymond, a pimp with a history of cruelty towards women. Raymond invites Merceau over for dinner, over which he confides in Merceau that he recently found out his mistress had been cheating on him and so he beat her, which led to a fight with her brother. Merceau views these events with the same detachment as he did the death of his mother. Later that week, Marie visits Merceau and asks if he loves her, to which he replies, "It doesn't mean anything, but probably not." She is sad about his reply, but shortly after they hear a commotion in the apartment building, which they find to be a policeman who has come to Raymond's apartment to tell him he has a court date for beating up his mistress. Raymond asks Merceau to testify in the case, and he agrees. Later, Marie asks Merceau if he wants to marry her, which he doesn't particularly, but is down if she wants to. By now it's probably clear that Merceau is a Sigma male who doesn't give a fuck what anyone thinks of him. The next week, Merceau, Marie, and Raymond go to a beach house owned by Masson, a friend of Raymond's. They swim together and enjoy the beach and the sun. In the afternoon, they go for a walk and encounter two Arab men, one of whom is Raymond's mistress's brother, who is no doubt aware of his recent violence towards her. They get in a scuffle and Raymond gets cut twice with a knife. Luckily, the cuts are just flesh wounds and a local doctor tends to Raymond. They return to the beach again later, despite the mid-afternoon heat, which is nearly unbearable, and encounter the Arab men again at a spring. There's a bit of a standoff between the two groups of men, and Merceau has to talk Raymond down from shooting the Arab man with a gun he had brought with him this time. Raymond eventually relents and gives the gun to Merceau for safekeeping. The Arab men eventually back off, and Raymond's ego is contented, and so they return to Masson's house. When they arrive, however, Merceau decides he doesn't want to go inside to deal with the drama or talk to the women who were shaken by the whole ordeal. All he wants to do is cool off from the sweltering heat and remembers the cool spring. He turns around and heads to the beach for a third time, walking for a long time in the overwhelming heat until he is delirious and burnt by the sun. At last, he can see the spring in the distance. When he approaches, though, he sees that the Arab man that stabbed Raymond is there again, alone this time. They lock eyes for a time, neither one making a move, but also not taking their eyes off each other. Sweat formed on Merceau's brow and dripped down his burnt forehead as the veins beneath it pulsed in pain. For some reason, he doesn't even know why, he started walking towards the man. The Arab man got up from the spring and drew his knife, and Merceau wrapped his hand around the revolver in his pocket. The sun flashed off the knife like a saber of light shining in Merceau's eyes. Then, for no real reason at all, Merceau pulls the trigger and the serene silence of the beach is shattered. The man falls to the sand motionless and Merceau shoots him 4 more times. The second half of the book details Merceau's time in prison and his dealings with the legal system. His lawyer is disgusted at his lack of remorse for the crime and lack of grief for the death of his mother less than 2 weeks ago. The judge doesn't understand Merceau's lack of motive and lack of repentance, especially when Merceau says he doesn't believe in a god to repent to. At his trial, the discussion quickly veers away from Merceau's actions and towards his character, especially his lack of grief towards his mother's death. Several members of the funeral procession are called to testify, and they all point out Merceau's lack of grief or tears. The prosecutor calls him a monster and compares him to a dangerous sociopath that is a threat to society if allowed to live. The judge finds Merceau guilty and sentences him to death by guillotine. He is returned to prison to await his execution. At the climax of the book, a chaplain comes to visit Merceau shortly before his execution, pleading for Merceau to renounce his atheism and embrace faith in God. But this enrages Merceau, who grabs the chaplain and shouts at him, declaring that life is meaningless and completely material with no gods or afterlife waiting to absolve us. His shouting eventually alerts the guards, who come to make sure the chaplain is safe, and he nods at them to show he is, but the holy man is clearly shaken and taken aback by Merceau's passionate speech. With tears in his eyes, the chaplain realizes his words are of no use, and he turns and abandons Merceau to his fate. I'll read the last few sentences of the book, which describe Merceau's acceptance of the inevitable. As if that blind rage had washed me clean, rid me of hope. For the first time, in that night, alive with signs and stars, I opened myself to the gentle indifference of the world. Finding it so much like myself, so like a brother really, I felt that I had been happy and that I was happy again. For everything to be consummated, for me to feel less alone, I had only to wish that there be a large crowd of spectators the day of my execution and that they greet me with cries of hate. So if you recall from the last video in this series, the existential concept of the absurd is the idea of finding purpose and meaning in a world that doesn't have any inherent purpose or meaning. Merceau certainly had no problem living his life authentically rather than in bad faith, as he has an almost comical indifference to living the way society expects him, but he doesn't truly embrace the absurd until the very end of his life. Albert Camus has a lot of overlap with Sartre and the other existentialists, but he personally rejected the title, instead preferring the term absurdism. Absurdism is a kind of middle ground between existentialism and nihilism, where the nihilist says there is no inherent meaning to be found in the universe and that the inevitability of death renders even purpose you make for yourself irrelevant, and the existentialist says that while there is no inherent purpose, it is paramount that you embrace the absurd and find purpose anyways. The absurdist says that while there is no inherent purpose, you can make one if you want, but the nihilists are probably right about death making it all ultimately pointless. Absurdism is more about facing and accepting the absurd and the indifference of the universe in the face of it all, as Meursault did shortly before his execution. Mistral is clearly meant to be analogous to Meursault and to represent absurdist philosophy. Like Meursault, she is from Algeria, she has her most formative experience when she kills someone else, and that killing leads her to embrace a newly realized sense of purpose. Like Meursault, she also feels completely indifferent to the lives she has taken and admits that she doesn't really have a reason for taking them. She explains her lack of purpose in life and how she sometimes envied her victims, who died for their nations, ideologies, or people. She was meandering through life, senselessly slaughtering her enemies until she met him. Raiden and the player are both left to wonder whom she is referring to, but later events make it clear she is talking about Senator Armstrong, whose plans for her gave her a sense of purpose that she never had as a soldier in the French Foreign Legion. She asks Raiden what his ideals are, and she laughs at his response, as she expected them to have more in common and finds his views naive. She then attaches several sets of dwarf gecko arms to her cyborg body, evoking a look reminiscent of a Hecatoncheires or other mythical monster with too many arms, and engages Raiden in battle. If you're not convinced about the Meursault-Mistral connection, there's a codec conversation where Kevin spells it out pretty clearly, and also her theme song has many references to The Stranger, starting with the title, A Stranger I Remain. The verse references the unforgiving sea that Meursault walked along during a hot summer day in Algeria on his way back to the spring. The chorus is a reference to Meursault's lack of remorse and sense of peace he develops while in prison. The outro repeats the title, A Stranger I Remain, as she is just as much of a stranger or outsider to society as Meursault was. To top it all off, her weapon is called the Stranger in French. Also, while editing, I realized that the Blade Wolf vs. Camus fight is probably another reference to the Stranger, as even though she is a step removed from killing Camus, she has Blade Wolf kill him on a beach on a hot summer day for no reason other than she didn't like him. Furthermore, the name Camus refers to the hot, dry winds affecting North Africa and the Middle East. For my fellow Americans, Algeria is located in North Africa, and the beach Meursault commits murder on is outside Algiers, on the shore of the Mediterranean Sea. Like the other Winds of Destruction members, Mistral is meant to draw comparisons to Raiden while also showing different paths he may have gone down if his life had gone differently. Mistral represents what Raiden could have become if he hadn't embraced his dedication to freedom for himself and others after the events of Metal Gear Solid 2. If he hadn't gone off to save Sonny and fight the Patriots, he may very well have continued to live his life as just a soldier for Foxhound and the US military, and would have been more susceptible to fighting for someone else's ideals, just as Mistral does for Armstrong. She may have embraced the absurd, but she lives her life in bad faith and rejects the radical sense of responsibility for one's own life that Raiden has embraced as an existentialist. Mistral's point about being willing to kill and die for one's ideals turns out to be foreshadowing, as she is outclassed and Raiden is absolutely willing to kill for his ideals. He manages to slice open a container of liquid nitrogen, freezing her in place before beheading her. They went all out on the physics with her death too, as the rest of her body stays frozen stiff if you don't chop it into pieces. Dolzaev realizes that her vital signs are rapidly deteriorating and starts a Zoom call with both of you.
I lost. So this is how they felt.
What?
Dying. For a cause.
Wait. No. Hold on.
I am sorry. He was too much.
I do not need apology. I need you alive.
But I know you will never fall.
What is this talk about?
Je t'aime. De tout mon corps.
Je t'aime.
Dolzaev understandably had a crush on Mistral, and he is surprised to hear her say she loves him, but Raiden quickly shatters his dreams.
She's not talking to you, idiot.
You killed her! You vile nuts!
That's rich coming from you. It's over, Dosaev. Surrender. Translation?
Why would I surrender? We are exactly where I want.
Shit.
Built with Russian money to make Russian money. It is no plan for Abkhaz. It is their prison. But now, they will be free!
Damn! Crazy son of a bitch!
Raiden? Raiden, what happened?
Bastard blew himself up!
I see. Time to get you out of there. We're sending a helicopter. Secure an LZ.
Understood.
With Dolzaev dead and his forces scattered, the military junta in Abkhazia is over and Raiden's mission is complete. Thanks for watching. Please like and subscribe to the channel if you enjoyed the video. I'm not sure if I will make a video about the Mexico chapter of the game, as there isn't much philosophy going on there, so I might just skip ahead to the Denver chapter and the monsoon fight, which has lots of interesting stuff going on relating to memes and how they control culture. Let me know in the comments if you'd like a video in this style to cover the events in Mexico. My current plan is just to skim through the major points in the beginning of the video about monsoon and memes. Thanks again for watching, and stay tuned for the rest of the series. Peace.